Hey, and welcome back to Eat Out at Home, the podcast. Today, I want to get into a topic that I see people struggling with online. I've heard people talk about in real life, and even something that I have had challenges with over the years, and that's meal planning. Why is it so inconsistent? Why does it feel like such a chore? Why doesn't it always seem to work? And so if you're someone who's like, yes, Evelyn, like I need to figure out this meal planning thing because it's I know it's the thing that's going to keep me on track for eating out at home, for cooking at home consistently, for not being caught in somebody's drive-through. This is the episode for you. Now, if you've mastered meal planning and you're like, I've got a system that works for me, listen, shout out to you. I'm going to present in this podcast some reasons and some alternatives to why I think most people are inconsistent or resistant even to meal planning. So let me just say this. Here's my thesis, right? And here's, I've been teaching people to cook since 2010, right? So I've been at this a long time. I've had a lot of conversations around food and meal planning and prepping and cooking at home. And here's what I've noticed, and even in my own journey into getting back to cooking at home consistently, meal planning, the title in itself is a little misleading because meal planning is, sitting down and writing out, this is what I'm going to consume over the next week or 2 weeks or however long you meal plan, right? And if I were to give it a more accurate title, I wouldn't call it a meal plan. I would call it an eating plan. This is what I plan to eat over the course of the next 7 days, 2 weeks, however long you meal plan. And the reason why I say it's an eating plan and not a meal plan is because it doesn't take into account all of the things that need to happen in order to get that meal on the table. So if you sit down and you say, okay, on Monday for lunch, I'm going to have a veggie wrap. And, for breakfast, I'm going to do, oatmeal and fruit. And then, for dinner, I'm going to do, grilled chicken and with a side of cauliflower rice and, maybe a salad. I'm none of that sounds super exciting, but work with me here. That's great, right? Because even just knowing that, okay, is part of the journey. However, it doesn't take into account the following things. Number one, checking your fridge, refrigerator, freezer, pantry, all of that to see what you have on hand. It doesn't take into account when you either need to go to the grocery store or order grocery delivery. It doesn't take into account when you need to wash the veggies, wash the fruit, prep them, get those things ready to go into, storage, right? Cool storage or dry storage. And it doesn't take into account the time and when you're going to actually prepare those items. So one of the reasons why I think it's, meal planning is so challenging for people, or we find ourselves being inconsistent, is because it's missing like 95% of the pie, right? Of all the steps that need to be involved. And so an eating plan is great. But what I have found that works for me is I can start with an eating plan, but then I also need to plan, here's the day that I'm actually going to write the plan. Here's the day that I'm actually going to create a grocery list and either do grocery delivery or grocery pickup or go to the grocery store. Here's the day and the time that I'm actually going to prep the ingredients, or actually meal prep if you're someone who meals preps. And I'm going to do an episode about meal prepping versus ingredient prepping. And, here's when I'm actually going to cook it. And that when I stick those little things throughout my week in my calendar, it's a little bit more realistic than to just say, okay, on Monday I'm having this, Tuesday I'm having that. I need that. And actually what has worked better for me is not even to necessarily assign days. It's more so like, here's what's on the menu for the week. That way I know what to shop. And based on how much time I have in any given day, if it is a designated cook day, then that is what I'm going to cook that day, because I've already got the ingredients prepped and I know this is on my menu for the week, right? So it gives me structure, but it also gives me a little bit more flexibility, right? That, life happens, and, or, sometimes we're working or doing things in life or with family and friends, and things take longer or go longer than we thought, and we have a little less time. So on the day that I maybe thought I was going to do a coconut chicken curry and 2 sides and all that, might be the day that it's like, you know what, I'm actually going to have salad with a piece of fish for dinner, right? Because the fish is fast and the salad is a no-brainer. And I'm going to move that more involved cooking day to another day, right? So, I want you to really kind of think about, how can you sit down and take your eating plan, if you are creating a traditional meal plan, and then really look at your week, look at your schedule, look at, the demands on your time, and go, okay, when's going to be the best day and time for me to make a shopping list and go shopping. I typically don't do those two in the same day. I don't know about you. I will say this. Sometimes I do make a list and shop in the same day, but a lot of times, for sure, I am not shopping and cooking in the same day. It's one of those things that I've learned about myself, that I've said to myself, I said, oh, Evelyn, you're not going to do that. You're not going to actually go out to the store, because I usually have multiple locations that I'm going to when I'm grocery shopping, and then come back, put all that up, wash all the produce, get everything scheduled, and then proceed to prep and cook. I know that that's not going to happen in the same day for me. I've just observed myself over time and over the years. And so I take that into consideration, that, a shopping day and a cook day are not going to be the same day. I also know that typically planning, making a list, and shopping don't happen on the same day. So I can plan and make a list on the same day. I do that often. But that whole process of, I'm going to plan, and then I'm going to make a list, and then I'm going to shop on the same day, I know it's not going to happen. So what I do is I'll say, okay, listen, I just need a quick little, 10-minute, 5-minute even window to be like, okay, here's what I'm going, what I would like to eat this week, right? And the reason why I can do it in under 10 minutes is because I have meal templates, and I'll talk about that in another episode. But I know my meal template, so I can just kind of plug and play. Okay, this is kind of what's going to be for breakfast. This is going to be for lunch. I like a little afternoon snack, and here's what's for dinner. And here's a little treat, if I need something that I know I want to have a little treat that week, right? And so it's easy for me to kind of plan that out based on my meal templates. I can create a grocery list, and that task is done, right? That task is done. Then I have a shopping day, and then I have a cooking day. And I know that seems like, wow, that's a lot of time. And I am aware that I am a person who is unmarried and child-free, and who works for herself and works from home. And so I'm not saying that, the way that I do it has to be the way that you do it, or is the most effective way. It's what works for me, but I definitely want to share kind of like, maybe there's a piece of this that you can take in consideration. Like, maybe you hadn't thought about, like, yes, shopping and cooking on the same day is not a thing for you, right? And you recognize that, or just even planning out, like, here's the day that I shop, but here's the day that I'm going to prep ingredients, or actually, meal prep. I will tell you, I'm not a meal prepper. Again, I'll do an episode about meal prepping versus ingredient prepping. I am not a meal prepper. I have realized that does not work for me. However, it works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me because I enjoy the art of cooking. It doesn't feel like a chore to me. But it's definitely something that I have to be, I have to stay on top of. And so here's the thing, you want to look out for, like, if your goal is to really eat at home more and cook at home more consistently, you kind of want to look at the things that trip you up. I mentioned in a previous episode how I know that if I get down to the point where there's not enough ingredients in my fridge, or there's not enough food that's already cooked and ready for me to eat, that I have like a par level, that once I get to, like, okay, I've only got 2 or 3 more servings of this, it's time for me to cook again. So keeping my fridge and my freezer and my pantry stocked and kind of days ahead, right? Well, my freezer and my pantry are like weeks ahead. But keeping my fridge, and all the fresh produce and things like that several days ahead is really what keeps me in line. But it's me knowing what my tendencies are. I know if I'm hungry and that there's nothing that's already cooked and ready for me to eat in the refrigerator, I'm probably going to eat out. I know that about myself, because I'm like, okay, it's going to be 30 minutes before I can get something on the table. And so instead of trying to force myself to be disciplined in that moment when I'm hungry, right? And so I've already got this pull on my willpower. I move that to when I'm not hungry and it's like, oh, I've only got lunch and dinner left, right? Then let me make sure I get ahead for the next day or set myself up for success. So want you to really kind of think about, are you meal planning or are you creating an eating plan? And how can you take the different components that need to happen, the different activities that need to happen, break them up across your week? If you have a spouse, if you have a family, can you delegate different things to different people? And, how can you really be mindful of, okay, the reason why this meal plan may not be working for me is because I'm missing all of these moving pieces. So I know this episode was a little bit all over the place. I hope that it was beneficial to you. Maybe you got some tips or things like that. And then listen, I'd love to know some of your meal plan or eating plan tips to getting, food on the table and cooking at home consistently. You can always head over to Instagram and tag me at Chef Evelyn. And I would also love to know what else you would like to hear on the podcast. This is me sharing my journey, getting back to cooking at home consistently and the tips and experiences and lessons that I'm learning again along the way. And listen, I'd love to know what you're doing too. You may have some things up your sleeve that might be beneficial to all of us that are in this discussion. So with that said, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave it a review. And if you're curious about what I'm cooking in between episodes, make sure to stay connected with me on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, where I'm sharing delicious behind the scenes grocery hauls, recipe inspiration, food for thought, and so much more. I'll see you in the next episode.